You are tuning in to Access Live, a show about raising awareness, what's going on in the community, and to address the issues that impact youth and their families that have serious emotional and behavioral challenges. We are located at the Brookins Building at 1776 East Washington in Urbana, Illinois, and at the downtown location at 202 West Park Street.
It is again Wednesday afternoon, and you are tuned in to Access Live, a community education and engagement initiative of the Access Initiative. I'm your host, Imani Bazzell, and I'm so glad to rejoin you after a week off for our Thanksgiving break, where I was happy to go to New York with a little nicer weather, but as I understand it, you all had some lovely weather while I was gone. Somebody said it was 58 and stuff like that. That is just wonderful. We love every warm day we can get. But one of the very exciting things about the winter solstice, which comes December 21st or 2nd, people, what we call pagans, before Christianity and Islam, would celebrate the winter solstice. And it's how Christians decided Jesus' birthday would be on December 25th, since people were already celebrating at that time of the year. So you'd say, why are people celebrating at the coldest time of the year? Well, just like they say, or just like psychologists want us to know, that the darkest hour is just before dawn. And didn't the stylistics or somebody say that too?
Right,
yeah.
That's right.
The winter solstice actually marks the end of the coldest days we're going to have, and the celebration is actually for spring that's on its way, because thenceforth we're getting a little bit closer and closer to the sun. So it's actually warming up. So isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Share that with your children. So again, today we are continuing with our look at anger and imaginations about anger in the African American community. And I'm so happy to have in the studio again our co-pilot, Miss Karen Crawford Sims, who is the coordinator for the Access Initiative for wraparound services, training, and technical assistance. Welcome, Miss Karen.
Welcome.
And how was your break?
It was good. I got a chance to go see my little person too, so that it's always wonderful to go and reconnect as they launch and blossom and grow.
They are launching.
They're launching, so it was great.
And I said, Lyric is, because, Karen's daughter Lyric goes to an all-girls school down in Atlanta. And Amina says, Lyric is like, it's like I got 500 sisters here.
That's exactly.
And it ain't always good.
That's exactly.
It's still lovely to me.
Yeah, it is lovely. And it's doing everything an all-girls school is supposed to do around leadership and voice. And she's finding herself. So
I love it.
Yes.
Wonderful. As is mine. So, there has been in the news. Now, let me think now.
Ferguson happened on Monday.
The grand jury hadn't yet come down last time we spoke.
Nope.
And so, of course, you all have been following the events in Ferguson and the admittedly expected no indictment decision from the grand jury, because many of us read this as it having been fixed from the beginning. All the prosecutors I've seen on the multiple news shows I've watched are saying they've never seen a grand jury run this way. They've never seen, except for Giuliani, and they've never seen a prosecutor actually switch hats and function as a defense attorney within the grand jury system. So while we were not surprised, it still stings. And some people, of course, still felt stung in Ferguson and around the country. But some of the beautiful stuff we found was the solidarity marches and gatherings actually throughout the country. when I was in New York, the first evening my daughter took me out, which would have been that Tuesday the next day. We took the subway. You know, we're in Harlem, so we're in Uptown. Y'all remember Uptown Saturday night? Yeah, that's where we were. And then you go downtown to Union Square and various places on your way to the Brooklyn Bridge. So we got off at Union Station, and before we were coming up the stairs, what is all this noise? Well, it's exciting. We're in New York, right? Honey, stepped out onto the street, and what did I step into? The Solidarity March, hands up, don't shoot. It was so exciting. Yeah, so, of course, I get to walk through the curb. Yeah, hands up, don't shoot. Right, I fall right in, right? That's right? And poor little Amina standing on the side like, she knows she can't show. She's ready to move on because she wasn't raised that way. But it's obvious she would like to move on.
That's so funny. That is so funny.
So well, that was lucky.
That was lucky.
Yeah.
So Lyric, it's so funny. So she texted me and said earlier in the day that she was going to go. And I was like, I'm proud of you, blah, blah, blah. And Lyric goes, she's like, I think you're probably one of the few parents who was like, boy, you made my day. I'm so proud of you. So she's like, she and her friends were out making signs. But what was interesting, so in preparing for it, they went into downtown Atlanta, so the CNN building.
Right.
And there were tanks in the morning of so they knew the protest had been announced by text. But there were tanks outside of the CNN building. And I was like, so are you not going to go? And she's like, oh, no, I'm definitely going to go. And so throughout the whole movement, so she went, and I don't know if you guys know, but Atlanta had several different events.
Yes.
So they had like a full tier. They had not only the march, but they had an organized sort of rally, and then they had a thing at the park. So they had a bunch of different things.
That's right, and New York did too.
Yeah, and so she started off, and I would say, you know, so we talk about things, and she was like, first of all, Atlanta. So she's like, there's civil rights activists in the crowd giving us instructions about behavior. She's like, there was so much wisdom. She's like, it was so supportive. It was so great. She's like, and instructive. Like, people were literally teaching people how to do things. She was like, there were attorneys in the crowd. I would joke with her, and I was like, okay, you guys are going to laugh. But I was like, okay, so if something goes down, because as she started explaining, like, the later it got, the more the formal folks started to leave, and the more youth-oriented it became.
A little more hard-headed.
Yeah, so we were texting, like, and we were like, hey, you know, if it gets crazy, go find, okay, you guys are going to, like, go find the white people.
Right.
And she was like, they already instructed us to do that.
Oh, Lord have mercy. That's a part of the safety plan,
Yeah, she said they already.
Because they know they ain't going to hurt white people.
That's what she's like. They already instructed us to do that. She's like, they did that verbally. She's like, but that was a part of the texting tips on how to do it.
That is too much.
So she was like, you know, she had brought her white friend, and she was like, so you're the designated white person.
She's a designated driver, designated white person. We'll just stand behind you when it gets crazy.
That's right.
That is so funny.
And what was interesting, so it was really, really interesting for her to be for the whole thing. Yes. But when it went left, because it did go left in Atlanta, she actually had 5 friends who were arrested.
Okay.
And
something to tell their grandkids.
Luckily, her school, though, was hyper responsive.
Beautiful.
They got them out, like, that night. And it was a school, so parents didn't have to be bothered.
Beautiful.
But the school was very responsive. But she saw what happened. So as the elders left, so this is a note to all of us, as the elders left, and it became youth-driven, people stopped following the rules. And so she's like, as long as there was a balance between elder and youth, it worked out beautifully. She's like, but then when it became, she's like, because we just didn't know any better. So young people just started, and it's like, and it was just so easy. She also believes, and again, this is all speculative, that there were things in the group to incite not correct behavior.
Oh, I believe
She said
that
did not feel like it was coming from the people who were organizing it.
No.
It felt like...
And the same thing happened in Missouri.
She said it felt a little inauthentic, you know, when it started to go bad.
Exactly. There were certainly agent provocateurs in every crowd.
Yeah, and so for her, that was also eye-opening. That was still very instructive about, like... And also to read what was narrated about it versus what it was like to be there and have to friends that was there. She was like, I just learned so much we talked about this, about the media. She's like, because it was framed one way. She's like, and actually in Atlanta, they kind of covered up some of the racial overlay. She said, but the next night there was a march, and they organized with the black law enforcement, and there was not a single bad thing that happened.
That's wonderful.
But that was all organized. Black law enforcement stepped forward.
Who are very progressive.
Very
Their
progressive.
organization
all
is,
stepped
yes.
forward and protected. And they
That's
said
right.
it was completely uneventful the next night.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Uneventful but meaningful.
Yeah, exactly.
Particularly because it was done in partnership with law enforcement.
I'm hearing a number of things. One of the things we know about youth, because we were youth, is that youth, as opposed to adults, sort of put less space between what we call stimulus and response.
We could talk about that in
that's
anger.
A cover
that's
issue,
right. That's right. Yeah.
So we're talking about anger today.
That's right.
And we have ample reason to be angry.
That's right.
The question is, how will we respond? And as we grow up and mature, it's not that we would never, as adults, respond angrily in a violent way or what have you, but you develop the ability to put more space between what makes you mad and what your decision is to do something about it. And that's why a good integration of youth and adults is really important. But one of the other things that's really important is there's been a lot of attention now to youth development. Obviously, Access Initiative has put a big emphasis on youth development, and in this case, we mean youth leadership development. So we've seen a lot of youth. And here, there's the teenage piece, but oftentimes when we're talking about youth here, we're talking about, say, 19 to 30,
27.
Even 20, late 20s, maybe even early 30s. And there's been a lot of good community organizing training, nonviolent direct action training. And so if we could even expand that cadre of young people, so when, the 50-plus people say, it's time to go home and rub my feet, we still have young people in the audience who are able to still bring the leadership that makes the point without destroying things that are actually important to us.
That's exactly. Yeah. She said, in terms, so her word was, because we talk about this at home, just layered support.
Yes.
So what we needed was just more people out there who could continue to reinforce the message. She said, because the leadership, even the youth leadership, who were part of Shutdown Atlanta, were saying the right things, but there weren't enough people in the crowd to help reinforce the message that was coming from the top. And she was like, so even if there were young adults in the space to help young adults not move into groupthink, she said it would have kept things on a...
so that layered approach is...
That's
okay,
right.
so y'all keep that in mind, this idea of layered support.
That's right.
Is really important. And part of our struggle with anger and maturing as a community has to involve that. When we're in our most danger is when... we are not intergenerational in our work. Can you say something about that?
Well, this is one of those things, right? Like there's some wisdom, some skill, some brain development that happens, like right or wrong, with some age. And so having people, again, like having people who had been through multiple marches with her to give her information, she said was super helpful. But also having young people who spoke her language was super helpful. And how the issue was framed maybe to some people who were my age in the room were a little bit different. It meant she was actually able to add more meaning to what was happening, because I get a whole history. I've been living through... Unfortunately, my mom reminded me, one of the first march I went to was around a police action shooting in Tampa. She's like, and you're dragging me to that in Tampa. And I think I was like 13 or 14 when I did that first. So I've been living this. So I come to it at a different place. For her, if she talks about it, what the promise is, because we've offered them a different promise around safety and liberty and freedom. And she said, so when these things happen... it really does seem like there's a violation of the promise in a way that's so core.
In this generation, then, they have a higher expectation
of liberty,
for justice and liberty versus our generation and older. there is some justified cynicism
That's right.
that we may ever get it. So then they may even feel much more betrayed than us.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
that's right.
And the other thing I want to say
Okay,
that
well, look,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so this is not serious, but she said, she's at an all-girls school. It's about 37% African American.
Mm-hmm.
But she's like, and this isn't the right thing to talk about because it's serious. She said, but young black girls are like, you can't kill it, right? Like, first of all, like, every time you hear about a young man with possibility in college, she's like, we just can't afford to lose.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, so the violation of young black men feels so sacred.
That's
like
right.
They feel so protective of them and really
the hurt and the loss is exponential.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're so precious.
And did she feel like her white student friends got that in a meaningful way?
Not as much as her Latina sisters.
Okay.
Because I don't know if everybody knows about this. So, the immigration work got really married well to the Michael Brown issue.
Yes,
so
yes.
people didn't pay, and again, didn't get a lot
I
of media
know.
talk.
Mm-hmm.
But people saw like what it's like to have your liberties violated and to feel so vulnerable and to have no rights and to be voiceless. So lots of Latina women joined in really tight alliances to say like, we get this and quote, we know what it's like to have our families torn apart. Different, but we're there with you. And so that was very, very powerful.
That's very exciting
very
because
powerful.
Black-Brown coalition is so important. And you all, the listeners, before we went on the air, I was telling Karen that I had gotten some information about a Latino, a Chicano gentleman in Chicago who has been around electoral politics for a long time, worked on the Harold Washington campaigns, etc., who's going to throw his hat in the ring for mayor.
Wow.
And there's a lot of talk about Black-Brown coalition because of the population breakdown. So it's interesting. They showed the population breakdown by race, which was kind of almost felt like 30-30-30.
Yeah, that I can imagine.
Latino, African American, and white. But when you break down the voting population, see, in the Latino and Black communities, more of our numbers of people are young.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to who's eligible to vote, it's absolutely majority white.
Yeah, that's right.
But if Black and Latinos organize together, they really could decide the outcome of multiple municipal elections.
Yeah.
And apparently this guy just has a strong history of doing coalition work, being progressive, etc. So it would be interesting to see how the African American community responds and supports, and what will it say about our mental health?
Yeah.
You can't live a parochial life.
Absolutely.
The world is just too
that's
big
right.
and too
That's
open.
right.
So one of the other things I wanted to say that was good about the protesting and the solidarity work is that people all over the country were not only marching in solidarity, but were also doing civil disobedience.
That's right.
And two things lovely that I want you to amen me on. One was where I was in New York, so I said when we got off the subway, walked right
that's
into
right.
it.
Okay.
Very multiracial
Yeah,
crowd,
that's right.
very exciting, gave me chills. So we before we were going back home, we went to Whole Foods.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm
All
gonna
right.
tell y'all, if I lived in a city with Whole Foods and I had the kind of money it takes to like
Really
shop
shop
in
there?
Whole Foods regular, y'all would see me in there every day.
Yeah,
I do
absolutely.
love some
Yeah,
Whole Foods.
absolutely.
So anyway, we went to Whole Foods because she could get vegan stuff there, and she was supposed to bring some vegan. Y'all know what a vegan is? A vegan is a vegetarian who also does not consume egg and dairy products. Do we have a call? Time out or call or both? Okay. Okay. Hello, caller.
Good afternoon, Imani.
Hey, darling, how are you?
Well, I'm re-traumatized like I think of many people across the country right now.
Did you hear about the Eric Gardner decision?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know this is
okay. No. I want you to tell our audience that decision was made today and what happened.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable that you can, and I always call in because I know there's a lot of discussion And I know young people are very much in support of this idea that the president is asking for money for body cameras.
Yeah.
For a number of police officers around the country, and I'm in support of that. But what do you think this is going to do to the young people's thinking when the officers didn't have a body camera? They weren't wearing a body camera, but it was caught on camera.
Clear as day.
Clear as day. Eric Gardner, was...
Remind people who he is.
Number one, that was against the law.
Wait a minute. Remind people who Eric Gardner is, what the situation was.
Eric Gardner is the gentleman who was apparently selling illegal cigarettes, and he was accosted by the police officers. There was somewhat of a refusal by the officers to just surrender. He was taken down by the police officers and choked.
Held by multiple police officers, including, I think, a lieutenant or a sergeant.
Absolutely, but they were only holding one officer accountable for choking him to death. Eric Gardner is also the gentleman who was saying that he could not breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was all caught on camera.
Yeah.
And today was the grand jury made their decision not to indict.
Yeah.
And so I want to, your listeners, I'm wondering what this is going to do to, we're still marching and seeking justice for Mike Brown. We're talking about the body cameras for the officers. And this was caught on tape. So I'm wondering what this is going to do to our young people who are in support of the body cameras and feel as if there won't be any mistake about what happened on the street. If there was a body camera used, we could clearly see if Mike Brown had his hands up.
Yeah.
And we could take that before the jury and we could get justice.
And here in this case, a camera caught it and it still didn't matter.
And it still didn't matter.
Yeah.
The grand jury is assigned to find whether there was probable cause.
That's all. It's not a trial.
It's not a trial. If there was probable cause. We also know in the Garner case that the coroner determined there was a homicide.
Right.
And so you had that evidence. You had the video. So I want to let the young people know this is why clearly what they are doing is important.
So critical.
I think critical that they are standing up and that they're making their voices heard. Because as you were saying, this is not our civil rights movement of our day. These young people have a lot to say, and they're getting their messages out through mass media. And they're using their own social media to get organized. See, this is a different kind of organizing.
That's right.
And so it can happen very quickly when these things erupt. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in New York and how the young people are going to respond to the news of Eric Gardner. I'm sitting back and, kind of watching how these young people are taking this whole movement from civil rights to human rights.
That's right.
And bringing that to justice.
Wonderful. And we will be right there behind them, giving them any assistance they request and require.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's time for us to we talk about the layer approach. We're going to be there with them. We're going to be there encouraging them. We are going to be lockstep in how they are going to seek justice, because it is going to take the young people to stand up and get justice. We know that if the laws are written so that they are not working for us, then it's time that we change the law.
That's right. and implementation of the law.
Implementation of the laws, and we need to change the laws. There was
Yes.
a law in the books that chokeholds was illegal, but they found some way
Yeah.
to get around that. So what we have to do is these young people who are going to law,
Yeah.
young people have to be vigilant. These young people have to continue to vote. And my thing is that if I look at the grand jury, now this is my own personal opinion, as I would look at something that I wanted, in politics we say if you want something to die, send it to committee to die.
Yes, we've heard that.
just send it to committee.
Or hand it over to a commission.
So if there's a law that you really don't want to pass, send it to a committee. Send it to committee and let it die in committee.
Yeah.
I believe this system of justice is where, when it comes to law enforcement officers, and there's a question of the use of force, the prosecutors cannot prosecute these cases. There has to be some special prosecutor.
Yeah, the special prosecutor, that's being talked about a lot, that should sort of be the standard way we do things because of the closeness between the prosecutor's office and the police officers. Just,
Absolutely. And
help
they
them
do
by
want-
allowing them to step aside.
Well, and there again, young people, should they be allowed to not do their job? Should a prosecutor be allowed to pass their job on to the grand jury, and when we know that it gets to the grand jury, what the probable outcome will be?
We do, and all that we've heard over and over is if a prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich in front of a grand jury if they wanted to. So when they don't get an indictment, history tells us it's because they didn't want one.
That if they did not want one.
Well, Miss Girl, thank you so
We need our
much.
young people to be thinking.
We do, and we'll be behind y'all. Thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Sam, do we need to take break first or call first? Okay, y'all listen, it's getting hot in here. We're going to take a break. Don't go nowhere. We'll be right back.
Access Live can be heard every Wednesday afternoon from 2 to 3 p.m. on WBCP 1580 AM in Champaign-Urbana. You can learn more about the Access Initiative by visiting their website at www.access-initiative2.org.
And we're back. This is Imani Bazzell, your host for Access Live, a community education and engagement initiative of the Access Initiative. Today, we are continuing our probing conversation on anger in the African American community and imaginings around anger of others about African Americans. Today in particular, we are looking at this phenomena that's called the magical Negro. If many of you have been reading and listening to commentary, there's been a lot of talk about that lately. If you are not already in the scholarly community, where this is a concept that's been written about for a number of years. Now, let's see if this clicks for you. So, when Officer Darren Wilson, in his testimony before the grand jury, had the opportunity to describe his experience with Mike Brown, apparently he got maybe 4 hours in front of them with no cross-examination. So he said, Mike Brown came at him. He looked like a demon. He had superhuman strength, that this officer felt like a 5-year-old, and Mike Brown felt like Hulk Hogan coming after him. And, he hit him, and then he said when he ran away, and then he suddenly turned around and he came back at him and was getting closer and closer. It was so menacing that he had no choice. He had to shoot. It was the right thing to do. And Karen, I think we believe him that that's what he saw.
That's right.
That's the mental health issue there,
That's
right?
a scary thing. Yeah.
He, in his mind, probably was not making this up.
That's right.
So there's this whole phenomenon that his perception of what happened has been written about and researched largely. And Karen, before I let you loose on that, we're going to go to our caller.
Perfect. Okay.
Hello, caller.
Good afternoon. How y'all doing?
Hey, we're wonderful. How are you?
I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. but other than
Oh,
that,
okay. Are you
I can't
feeling
get enough.
are you feeling super powerful?
Human.
Even demon like?
overcome- Yes, indeed. Yes, strong as Hulk Hogan.
You're so strong.
Yes, indeed.
Tell us, as a black man, just speak with your heart for a minute. I know a lot are not capable, but you are capable of speaking from the heart. What does it feel like to be a black man knowing that many people believe and have been taught, not just white Americans, but they then teach other people, that black people, black men in particular, have superhuman strength, are by nature menacing and beast-like, and therefore it's completely understandable that we see this type of law enforcement repression of what academicians call the black body. What does that feel like?
It feels like that you walk around in somebody's crosshairs all the time. It feels like there's always a reason that you need to make sure that nobody's feeling threatened by you. And I think it really has a lot of us thinking too much about that, and having to spend so much time when you're just walking down the street saying, hey, I want to make sure that I smile so this person doesn't feel threatened by me. Is that me succumbing to this disposition about who I am as a black man, or is this just nice of me to do to create an environment that I would like to live in? I think there's a lot of work that has to go on based upon those notions that have been put out there. That's one thing that I feel in response to that. And trying to contextualize the rest of the conversation that you all have been having today. I also think that there's a repression and a suppression that takes place of the natural feelings to be outraged.
Yes.
Right?
Like we don't have permission.
Right. One of the things that I run into now that we're working with some of the trades to try to bring more diversity, especially amongst these quote-unquote skilled trades. I had a gentleman tell me in the office one day that, he had brought in a few blacks to give them an opportunity, and when they didn't work out well, it really made it hard for everybody else. And I said, well, man, you ain't brought a few white boys in that they make it hard for everybody else.
Now all the white boys got it hard, huh?
Right. So, and it's just saying that we're going to, if we mess up, we make it harder for those behind us, our sons and nephews or whoever else wants that opportunity, because, see, we gave it to you and you messed it up. Well, don't nobody else go through that.
Right.
So that's just another thing that we're saying, that we have to walk around perfect, right?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, and that's a lot of weight to carry.
Well, Aaron, what you make me think of is there are these jokes that black comedians tell. And the reason we laugh is because we're so familiar, because we've done this very thing that they're describing when we're watching television, especially the news. When the news says something bad has happened and then they go to commercial, and over the commercial, all black folks are like, oh, please don't let him be black. Please don't let him be black. Please don't. Right? Because we know if the perpetrator is black, that we're all held accountable. And if they're white, then it's just that one person, and it's not an indictment of the whole race. Is that what I hear you saying?
I do feel that way 95% of the time. And I could say that I'm sure white men feel like they may be being profiled when it comes to murderers or cannibalistic people running around, mass murderers or serial killers, right? All the TV shows I watch, they say it's probably a white male between this age or whatever.
Because
So
that's the profile, yes.
That's been the profile. So I understand that profiling takes place based upon past actions and stuff like that, actual past actions. The problem that I have with, for instance, with profiling of black men as drug dealers or gangbangers or whatever, is that it's been so hyped up by the media that you tend to believe that this is the case, but every study across the country shows you that white boys do more drugs than anybody.
More drugs, and also this is the thing we want to get people to understand. I don't know any black people who own airplanes and yachts and all that actually get the drugs to the country. So the people who are the actual drug producers and distributors are not inner city black people and Latinos at all. But we're the ones on the front line and become the face of this treacherous scourge. But we never talk about the actual people who are perpetuating the scourge.
Right.
And
Let me
the
just say
diversity.
this last thing, and I'm going to get off.
Okay.
About Ferguson and about New York. I know that there's a lot of conversation. I heard you all talk about the need to have more wisdom, more maturity in these places of the marches and various things like that. And that I thought there was something very profound that Karen said about young people's expectation of justice may be higher than ours, right?
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I struggled with as I came up trying to sort of take the reins of leadership from some of our folks who were a little bit older, right? I found there were times when those who had been doing this for a while, who were a little bit older, had a disposition that was not welcoming, that was not respectful, that was dismissive. And it really puts young people in a bad space because they feel like they have a voice or their passion is not being considered.
That's right.
And the reality is that America wouldn't exist without that passion and that fire that burned in those who wanted to leave England because of injustice.
That's right.
So we cannot quail that in our young people and still keep calling for justice or calling for change when we keep repressing and suppressing that which is needed to bring about change.
That's correct. And what we need to do then, we have to make sure our young people understand the need to always be respectful of their elders. But what we also have to make sure that those of us who are elders have to check each other.
Yep,
because
that's right.
I grew up as a young activist. I've been marching and organizing and doing all that stuff since I was 13 and 14 years old. But it was under elders who embraced me and the young people I organized with. We were never led to believe that we were to be seen and not heard, and we were unwelcome. And we've got to bring that spirit back. So you make a really important point, Brother Aaron. And thank you for that.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I think that we there's a lot that I am encouraged by. I really appreciated my brother Chris Rock saying that ain't black progress, that's white progress. That ain't,
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to read that on the air. That was tough, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. So I'll stay tuned. I thank y'all.
Okay, thank you, darling. Okay. Okay, now what Brother Aaron was referring to is an interview that Chris Rock did just yesterday. And I decided to print it out and bring it. So since he brought it up, let me quickly read it. Also, welcome Patricia Avery.
Hi.
Hey, darling.
Well,
Thanks for
listen,
coming to join us.
I want you to do that, but I just want to dovetail off of
Okay,
what
go
Brother
ahead.
A-Dub
Go
was
ahead.
talking
Sure,
about.
sure.
Because I had to drive around
Uh-huh.
and try to gather myself before I called in, but I want the young people to know I am angry. I am angry, but we do have to use our anger in a constructive way, because if we don't, then they just dismiss us as angry black women, angry children. They want to be destructive. So we have to figure out a way to take that anger and use it mightfully in a very constructive way. But I don't want anybody to get the false impression that I am not angry.
And you know, and the thing about it is, in this country, there is also this idea that you're not supposed to be confrontational. right? Anger is a natural human emotion.
Absolutely.
Anger is a legitimate emotion. It's not one that we cannot and don't have the right to have. It's what we do with it that's critical. And y'all, I'm getting the sign from the engineer. So we're going to take another break, but I promise you it's even hotter. We'll be right back.
The Access Initiative mission is to build a trauma and justice-informed system of care designed to create a healed community that works to ensure that youth and their families are resilient, resourceful, responsible, and restored.
And we're back. We having a good old time here in the studio. Sorry y'all been missing it. So this is Imani Bazzell, your host for Access Live, a community education and engagement initiative of the Access Initiative. We are continuing with our series on anger and the Black community. Today we are, of course, talking about Ferguson and a bit about New York, just as a backdrop or context to help us understand the ways in which we feel justifiable anger, and whether that's legitimate. Well, the last time we checked with mental health people, anger is a legitimate emotional response, but when you are in the numerical minority and you have been mythologized in the ways we're talking about today, the magical Negro, there is so much to contend with. So before the break, we had a caller who was describing his experience of all this calculus he has to do in his head about how he carries himself every moment of the day when he's in mixed company, so white people won't be afraid or won't be in any way suspicious or questioning. Some of you may have seen a video that's gone viral. You can look it up. Maybe if you Google something like hands in pockets, stopped by police, something like that. A young man, luckily, pulled his camera out. You know, we can video with our smartphones these days. He was literally walking down the street with the hands in his pockets, and he was stopped by the police. And the police felt completely legitimate stopping him. Police said he had gotten a complaint and he had to respond. The guy is responding incredulously. What did I do? I didn't do anything. This is ridiculous. And even when the police officer says, yeah, I can see you aren't doing anything, but we get the call and we have to respond, he then goes on to say, well, by the way, what are you doing? So it's like, you can't win. So quickly, I promised I would read you all the Chris Rock interview from yesterday. Then Karen is going to come in with her deft mental health perspective. What do we need to be saying to our young people? We know the stories that parents always have to tell their kids about being safe, and then we find out it doesn't matter anyway. Real quandary. So yesterday, it says, Chris Rock tells some hard truths about race. In this interview with Frank Rich, so Frank Rich is from the New York Magazine, Chris Rock hit upon some very hard truths about America and race. One of those truths is that whites have made progress in dealing with race. Here's the thing. When we talk about race relations in America or racial progress, it's always nonsense. There are no race relations. White people are crazy. Now they're not as crazy. To say that black people have made progress would be to say they deserve what happened to them before. Black people haven't changed. They continue to be the same as they ever were, some good, some bad, some downright brilliant. What has changed is the way they are viewed by the dominant white culture and the way that culture has begrudgingly, on occasion, extended opportunities to the black community. Doors have opened, not fully, and too often there is a toll that most can't afford. But there is now room for a foot in the door, room for a black Secretary of State, a black president, even black political pundits. Black children today are growing up in a world which they can aim for the Oval Office as long as they never aim a toy gun in public. The messages they must be receiving from their parents who fear for their safety but want to encourage them to dream big dreams have to be terribly confusing. The advantage that my children have is that my children are encountering the nicest white people that America has ever produced. Let's hope America keeps producing nicer white people. You may not think that Chris Rock was speaking to liberals, this is the writer talking now, but I believe he was. What so many, especially liberal whites, miss is how we benefit from the actions of the less nice white people, the racists. As long as we allow young black men to be shot in the street by the justice system that we control, or locked up in jail on minor drug charges or no charges at all, we benefit. There is less competition in the job market when so many of them are in jail or have criminal records. Susan Brown Miller, in her work Against Our Will, Men, Women, and Rape, showed how even though most men don't rape women, all men benefit from the constraints that the threat of rape imposed on women. The fear of rape kept women from competing with men in many fields. It kept women off the streets at night, and that closed job opportunities that were open to men. All men do not have to rape all women for the fear of rape to be real to all women. And all white people do not have to be racist to benefit from the existence of racial bigotry. We do benefit, and that benefit even has a name: white privilege. There would be no such thing if there weren't a class of people who were denied the same privilege. Chris Rock is speaking to us when he talks about white people adjusting to a new reality, owning their actions, not even their actions, the actions of your dad. Yeah, it's unfair that you can get judged by something you didn't do, but it's also unfair that you can inherit money that you didn't work for. So yeah, while not all white people are bigots, all white people benefit from their existence. We have to acknowledge that, own it, and accept it as the unpleasant reality in which we live. That is step one. Step two is to change that reality. Wow, that was pretty good. Anybody who hollers at any of us will forward that to you. Karen, Miss Woman who actually has some background in mental health. We have the funeral today of a 12-year-old boy from Ohio who was shot dead 2 seconds after the police rolled up. When they called in the shooting, they said they believed he was 20 and had a gun.
That's right.
Talk to us.
Yeah, first of all, I don't even know where to start.
I know.
One of the things that I was thinking about is I really wish we would better define terms, though.
Yeah.
Because when things like the police action shootings happen, I feel like people don't understand what the word racism means. So we throw it around so much, and people confuse racial bigotry with racism. And systems, right? Racism is inherently a system. So when you have access to power and privilege and goodies, right? Racism, and that's the system. That's the ism part.
Right.
And so when people are like, well, black people are racist, I'm like, no, black people can't be, right? And I just wish we had a definition of like white privilege and racism, because I think, but the research suggests that I can see black people as threatening because of a system that reinforces that. They did a study, and I will send you the TED Talk, where they were looking at just how our eyes can change our health behaviors. But in that study, they were talking about, they showed people images of Obama. And they showed Obama lighter or darker. Mm-hmm. And the people who did not vote for Obama, who believed he was bad for the country, 82% of them saw him as darker.
Yeah.
Everybody who saw him as lighter thought he was going to be good for the country, right? Like racism, right? Like that's a set of policy, right? That's a
it's like a mass psychosis,
right? Because people have this idea, right, that certain people look a certain way in art, and even in the absence of evidence, you can't change their belief, right? And so people, so again, when we talk about police officer training or what reinforces the policy, one of my notes was like, what's the ask?
Yeah.
Well, the ask is to try to like change how people view black people or people of color, because as long as you can demonize them, as long as you don't own your own stuff and do the work, you're always going to have the potential, because we talked about the brain in other shows.
Yes.
The brain's going to shut off and you're going to go to the stereotype until we change the stereotype. When Brother Aaron was talking, and he was talking about, and Walter Mosley has a really great, I don't know if you remember the story where he talked about how he had to be hypervigilant. It's a wonderful essay around what black men go through. But what Brother Aaron was saying around what that does to you, and how you have to like think about your facial expressions. And when we went to like how he was talking about his experience and how it's so easy to be stereotyped as a drug dealer or whatever, when we feed into that, first of all, there's only one conceptualization of black masculinity, which is a small conceptualization, because all black men aren't whatever.
And a caricature can never be human.
Can never be fully. But if that's where you go, and even if we feed into it to say, hey, all black men aren't drug dealers, right? That's still a limited part of the conversation.
Right.
So, because it doesn't matter how you dress, what you look like, what your economic status is. If I can only see black men looking as an urban identified drug dealer, even when you're standing in a suit, even if you're in casual clothes, even if you're at the Hamptons, I'm only gonna see you,
golf.
right? I'm only gonna see you. The comments about the Obama girls, right? Like
that's right.
all of it has to buy, right? All of it is about like how the brain tricks you to believe a mythology.
So let me ask you this, Karen, from a mental health perspective, what is the cumulative effect of say what hypervigilance is, and what the effect it has on the people who feel they have to be hypervigilant?
So hypervigilance is the awareness that you have to watch everything that you say, everything that you do, even how you think, because you're afraid that your face will make people feel threatened or good or bad, or so you're
like the Obama girls, their face weren't right.
Right. You have to be constantly aware of your environment. What we also know is that people have done some research around health in terms of it creates higher stress outcomes. So it makes your blood pressure raise. It creates higher adrenaline in your body, so you get adrenal fatigue. It makes you obese, and so the desire for food and all those
and sugary things, right?
All of those things come from just the pressure of constantly being on watch. And I don't think people realize, and there's no, we talked about what do you tell kids. Black parents have to tell their kids to be on watch all the time. And that's unfair. And until we change policies and procedures that black parents have to sit down and talk to their kids around, okay, so in this environment you hear, in this store you hear, 2 or 3 people can only gather here, 4 or 5 people here, you got to look here. Oh, when somebody, it wears you out.
It is, in terms of mental and physical health, it feels like a death sentence.
That's right.
And at some point, you think that you can relax from that,
and you can't.
But you cannot.
And then shootings happen, and then you even in spite of the best instructions.
So no one can live up to the expectations of the magical Negro.
That's right.
And so what we have to do as we wrap today's show up is to remind people. Now, everybody who's listening needs to have access to the internet. And you need to call in to WBCP if you don't, because there's something wrong with that picture in 2014. So we need to fix that. But I'm assuming you do. Look it up. Look the term up. Look up Magical Negro. Do some more reading on it. Think about the things we've talked about, this idea of hypervigilance and anger and distorted perceptions. So we want people who are white, who have been taught this and don't even know it, to do some self-reflection, people who are black, who suffer under this, who maybe aren't doing the self-reflection to realize the way we're playing into the game. Let's hold hands while we do this, and I promise you there'll be more next week. Have a good rest of the week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Access Live. Access Initiative is a trauma and justice-informed system of care. We're glad that you joined us today. Please join us every Wednesday at 2 o'clock p.m. for Access Live. Thank you and be well.